Hi there, welcome back to the .NET conference. Really happy these folks here spend the whole day with us, or if you're just tuning in, welcome to the WPF session. My name is Dimitri Lylan. I'm a product manager and I work here out of Redmond on the Visual Studio product team. My primary responsibility on the product team is to make sure that the community is engaged and well represented, and I am also part of the feedback mechanism. So after the session, of course, if there's any feedback that folks want to give me, it is going into the right set of hands there. Today we're going to talk about WPF as our last session of the .NET conference. This session will focus on a variety of topics. You can think of this as an overview of what has happened since kind of November of last year through today, what kind of releases came out that affect WPF developers. Some things are specifically for WPF developers, other things are things that WPF developers can take advantage of. Now, if you're hoping that today's session will reveal something new, unfortunately, that's just not the case. But we will cover a lot of interesting topics. We'll talk about the tooling aspects. We'll talk about XAML tooling. And we'll talk about debugging and diagnostics and profiling capabilities of Visual Studio that are applicable to WPF developers. We're going to talk about the .NET framework and how it has evolved through today and what capabilities you can take advantage of. And we'll take a look at all sorts of edge cases where we talk about architecture, services, or even Windows 8.1 in certain situations. So let's jump right into it. The first section that we're going to cover is developer productivity debugging and profiling. Specifically, let's start with what's new for developers in Visual Studio itself. So when Visual Studio 2013 RTM shipped, we right away delivered on a bunch of promises to developers around XAML tooling. And this XAML tooling has all the capabilities that you see up on my slide. We've added IntelliSense for data binding, we've added go-to-definition, IntelliSense for resources, and all sorts of other capabilities right there in Visual Studio. Now, the good thing is about that release is that this capability is applicable to all XAML developers. So when you install 2013 out of the box without even any updates, you'll get enhanced XAML tooling for all platforms, WPF, Windows Store, even Silverlight plugin, or Windows Phone development. So that's great, and we'll demo a few of those capabilities later on. We also released at the same time as Visual Studio 2013 .NET 4.5.1. With .NET 4.5.1 and Visual Studio 2013 in combination on a developer's machine, you get all sorts of debugging capabilities that you wouldn't have before. For example, x64-bit edit and continue. So if you have a WPF application that you're building specifically for x64, before you wouldn't be able to edit the code during a breakpoint and then continue running the application, which is a great productivity feature, but you just couldn't get that before. So now with .NET 4.5.1, you can get that. You also have the ability to see the return value. So if you had a function that was processing something and returned the value, you don't need a temp variable to see what that value was. Visual Studio will show it to you in the locals window. And we also added a bunch of nicer sort of visualizations for how you got to your breakpoint and in a synchronous function. So those are all the debugging capabilities. Now the good thing is you don't need to worry that, oh, if I install .NET 4.5.1 in production, I'm going to have an issue with my IT department or something. That's really not the case. You just need 4.5.1 on your development machine, and you get all these developer capabilities, and then you can deploy your WPF app at whatever framework version that's applicable to your environment specifically. At the same time, we also added a profiling, a debugging capability in Visual Studio. So Visual Studio 2013 RTM shipped with the .NET Managed Memory Analysis capability. So you can now take a memory dump that was taken from a managed application, and you can inspect that memory dump right from Visual Studio. You can debug against it. There's a lot of cool capabilities. The features have dropped into this managed memory analyzer over time in different updates as well. So it certainly is evolving, a tool that's evolving and great for WPF developers, because we all know how memory leaks in production with WPF can be something that every developer kind of values to investigate and figure out and fix. And this makes it easier. All right, so let's jump into a few demos. First, I want to start off by opening up a web page, and I'll be doing a lot of this during the session because I want to show folks that there's a lot of really great resources to get started this session. Think of it as kind of, again, a quick run through of a lot of capabilities, but you're not going to go deep on any subject, right? There's just not enough time today. It's also the end of the day that for .NET Conf, and I certainly don't want to keep folks here for a very long time. But I do want to expose you to everything, so let's open up a blog, and all these links will be available in a blog post that I'll be publishing later on today, and also in the deck slides in the notes as well. So don't worry about getting the links down or something. You'll get all these links if you need them from one place. But this is one example where the Visual Studio Diagnostics team has done an excellent job, Andrew Hall there, to create a blog post that talks about how to diagnose memory issues in production. And I could never do justice to all these steps. This could be a full 20-30 minute demo alone to do it properly. But you can see here there's quite a few capabilities to capture data for memory, and then you go into inspection mode. It's quite a great post, so definitely check it out afterwards. But now let's actually go ahead and take a look at the tool and see how it looks like inside of Visual Studio. So I'm going to open up one of my applications here. It's a sample application. It's not really relevant to what it is. And I'm also going to open up a memory dump that I've already captured. So imagine this scenario. Let's kind of set this up. You're a developer, you're a WPF developer, and you have an application running on some user workstation, and they have had a problem in the application. You're suspecting maybe it's a memory leak, maybe the application memory size grew very large, and you're curious to kind of dive deeper into the application, and all you have the capability to get from that user is the memory dump from the IT folks at your organization. So in this case, I got one of those memory dumps. So here it is sitting in my machine. And now I can take one of these memory dumps, which I took using Task Manager, nothing special. The app was just running on my machine. Use Task Manager to create the snapshot. And I can just drag and drop it into an instance of Visual Studio. Now, this instance of Visual Studio also has my application open, so if the symbols load properly, which I'll cross my fingers that they will, then things will load even nicer in the debugger. So the way that you get to the Manage Memory part of this debugger is specifically through this new button right here. So that's, again, all in the blog post, but just to give you a quick visual tour. So all I did was I dragged the memory dump, this huge 800 meg file in, and it gave me a view of the file, gave me some metadata information, and gave me this brand new button to click. So I'm going to click on the Debug Manage Memory, and that's going to take me into a special view specific to debugging Manage Memory. And again, this works great for the WPF applications. And then once you're in the tool, you get a bunch of capabilities. I'll review them with you right now. So first of all, you can see the objects that are in memory. You can see their size. You can see how many of these objects there were. But not only that, you can load another comparative memory dump. So you can take memory dumps through time. You can take one maybe at the start of the application if the user says, the problem doesn't happen until 5 minutes into the run. So they start the app. You ask them to take a memory dump. They run for 5 minutes, they run into the problem, you ask them to take another memory dump, and you use that technique to basically create a side-by-side view. So I'm actually going to load a comparative baseline here. I have 2 of these dump files ready. So I'm going to open up the second one, and when I do, Visual Studio is going to analyze the second one, they're going to compare each other, and now I'm going to get some additional columns in the tool. These columns give me information of how these 2 memory dumps compare. It's a very useful way to dive deep. Another cool feature here is that the search, you can use kind of natural language that you might know about your application. So let's say you're curious, maybe my view model had something to do with this. I'd love to be able to inspect the view model for a particular page that the user is actually using. I mean, I know that's what they're doing, right? There has to be some tribal knowledge and all sort of adventures in memory debugging. And in this case, I'm going to go and say view model. So I know there's one view model in my app. And by running the search, by typing into this top right search box right here, it's able to filter down to the one view model in my application. It's able to give me information about that view model. Not only that, I can click to drill in, and I can highlight the view model, and I can expand it out, and I can see that there's a list of images, and the count was 105. And maybe I realize, wow, that really shouldn't be it. This count should never go above 30 or something. So that could already lead me to some interesting investigation. But you can see here, this is very rich. Unfortunately, zoom in doesn't work too well when I do this, but hopefully you're catching it at the zoom level by default, where you can see the actual values. I mean, this is just like the debugger experience in many ways, right? You hit a breakpoint while you're debugging. Developers of Visual Studio know what that's like, and you inspect some variable in memory. Well, this is inspecting a variable that was in memory during the time of the memory dump. So very powerful tool, really cool way to go about it. So that's the tool, but I've also mentioned things like edit and continue. So let me show you that, what that could look like. So here I have a very simple application where I just want to show one concept alone out of everything else. So in this case, I have an application that's being built to x64-bit. In fact, let's make sure that I'm not lying to you here. Let's go into properties. So the target, so the platform target is x64. There you have it. And now I'm going to show you a piece of code. It's really, really not a code that's going to win any awards. All I'm going to do is have a while loop here. So I'm going to run this application. And previously, what I'm about to show just wouldn't work. So I'm going to bring up the zoom here a little bit. So here you are. You see this while I at 200. And I'm going to say, all right, so this value is growing. You know, this code is kind of working as I expect it to go. But actually, I want it to stop when it hits 10. To do that, before targeting x64 just wouldn't work. So now I'm actually going to stop here. Let's run through. It's actually going to stop when it hits 10. So I never stop debugging, right? The edit and continue works as expected. So that's a cool capability right there. I also want to take this opportunity to show you some of the XAML editor capabilities. So let's open up a slightly richer application in terms of XAML. So I have this this small little app that I've built. We'll use this app a couple of times during different demos, but I just want to show you a couple of cool capabilities here. So for example, in my main window, let me open up the XAML view where we just want to spend some time. One of the pet peeves that XAML developers have had for a very long time is the whole, you know, if you want to comment and there's a comment in the middle of your comment, you can't. What I mean by that is that if you have a comment and you were, let's say, wanting to comment out around it, so let's say I had another data template. I'll give this one a key as well. So now I have two of them. And I'm going to say, you know what, I actually don't want either one of these. Now commenting things out actually will work as expected. It understands that there's a comment inside of the comment and it doesn't break. Seems like a small feature, but if you're a XAML developer, you're going to be thankful. So that's something that arrived in 2013. So I'm going to undo that because I actually do want this code to work later. We also added the capability to go to definition, which is very, very powerful. So let me show you what that looks like. So here I have a data template that I'm using. Let me find where it is. Oops. Image, there you go. So this is the data template, and if I scroll down to where it's actually being called from right here, this could be a potentially very large XAML file, right? And this data template for the item could be anywhere. It could be in another file. It could be in the resource header. You really before had to really struggle to figure out where things were. Now with the right click, even on things that are defined in XAML, you can go to definition and it jumps right to the data template. If Intellis, this go to definition works around different scenarios, so it'll work in many cases with binding, not in all cases, but in many. It works even with built-in types. So if, let's say, I really am not sure what window is, you know, something even that crazy, it will take me to the Object Explorer because window is not a type where the code is in my application, but I can get more detailed information on what window is. So that right there is a huge step forward, and there's other capabilities as well. So also another cool thing here is the ability to get rid of tags. So how often have we done this? Where, you know, we have a start tag and an end tag for this wrap panel, and that's great, but then you realize, man, I really actually don't need that close tag. You know, there's nothing inside. I just want to kind of make this a little bit nicer. So now I put it here and it vanishes, right? So that's being smart enough as XAML editor to understand by doing this automatic maneuver, I accomplish what the user wants without breaking anything. So that's the capability there. Also, we have the ability to change tags on both sides of the fence. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. If, let's say, I wanted to change, let's say, that's a good example here. Now let's do it this way. I'm going to go to the end. Oops. Let's make this code a little bit more. Oh, sorry about that. Try to run. Okay. All right. So here I'm going to show you what refactoring a tag will look like. So normally when you have a start and end tag, if you needed to change this button to be something else, like let's say this wasn't the button, but this was some kind of panel, and you wanted to change the type of panel it was, you can go ahead and change that to say, you know, stack panel, and changes the start and end tag, and of course things in the middle break. But you no longer have to run around to change your tag. This was an annoyance. In fact, I'll show you what I should have done from the beginning. I don't mind admitting to a bad demo here, is this stack panel to a grid. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to a grid, and it changes it on both sides. And of course orientation breaks, because orientation is a stack panel property, not a grid property. So there you go. There's a bunch of capabilities right there that let you do quite a bit. In fact, I'll show you one more cool demo. Personally, this is one of my favorites. I believe I have this open already. I need a more complicated application with more complicated XAML. I think this should do it. This is one of my favorite go-to definitions of all. How many times we as XAML developers take advantage of something from the framework itself, right? So text block section title is, hopefully I'm remembering this right, it's coming from the framework itself. So let me go to definition on that. Well, in this case it wasn't, but actually, yeah, I'm right, it was. Woohoo, I love when a demo works. So this is actually opening up resource styles.xaml. This has been a pet peeve of mine for a very long time, where the most common scenario, you know that you probably got the right static resource that you want to use, but you're like, what font does it have? You know, what font is it going to set? What base type is it using behind the scenes? So this ability to jump into resource styles is really great and powerful feature of Visual Studio. Let's jump back to the deck here. All right, so also we've added a bunch of tooling capabilities around debugging for developers since Visual Studio shipped. So what I just showed you is installed out of the box. If you have RTM, if you have Visual Studio 2013 with .NET 4.5.1 on your machine, they ship together, you install them, you're good to go. If you go ahead and install Update 2, you're going to get even more capability. So in Update 2, we added the CPU usage tool. The CPU usage tool enables you to see how your application is performing and to find perhaps places where CPU is spiking too high or doing something unexpected, or a process is running too low, kind of spiking the CPU enough that it's noticeable. So you can do various kind of analysis. The CPU usage tool actually works for Windows Phone, Windows Store, but the great news is out of the box with Update 2, which is free for Amazon subscribers, of course, when you install Update 2, you get the CPU usage tool for WPF applications as well. We'll demo that tool in a second. Also, with Update 3, the update that isn't out yet, we have a CTP2 with another release hopefully coming soon. So Update 3 adds a capability to a tool that has already existed before but did not support WPF. So if you are brave enough to install CTP2 of Update 3, this is a pre-release. Don't install that on production machines. We don't provide any go-live support. But if you have a machine or some VM where you can kind of mess around, or if you get this update when it goes to a go-live license at some point, the memory usage analyzer will then support WPF and actually Win32 as well. And I'd like to demo both of those tools for you. So let's jump into the demo. So I'm going to use my silly little application that I built, the slide viewer. I'm going to run it one time just to show you what the application does, and it doesn't do very much. So let's give it a second here. Yeah, build errors, my favorite kind. I think I have it open more than once. Yes, I do. Let's fix that. It's always terrifying to get one of these, but when you right away know what it is, it's very satisfying as well. Not the end of the world. All right, that build succeeded. Let's run this. So this app is a lot of fake. It doesn't have a lot of substance to it. The only thing that it actually concretely does is load these images. So when you see these images here, they're all loaded from disks. There's a folder with images. These are all my images, so nobody can claim copyright and sue me, hopefully. So I took a bunch of these at different events. I took one of my cat. This is a great one here. In my humble opinion, I'm a cat person. What can I say? So this application is like, I think of it as an image viewer. And inside the image viewer, I have a button that does absolutely nothing real whatsoever. The button is right here. If I open up an image and I hit this process button in the bottom right, and I wait, because why put a wait dialog of some sort, right? Just press the button and hope for the best. So you get a done dialog. At this point, the application actually hasn't done anything whatsoever, but it will facilitate some of our demos here. So let's go ahead and start playing around with the tools. So first of all, how do we even get to the CPU usage or memory analysis tooling in Visual Studio? Well, that's easy. You're going to go to Alt F2. That's one way. And you're going to open up the Performance and Diagnostics hub that we have here. Or if you don't know Alt F2 off the top of your head, I don't blame you. I learned it kind of for this demo. The way I always do it is I go to Debug and I select Performance and Diagnostic. It's right here. The one thing to mention is that to see this hub, you need Windows 8 on your developer machine. But again, the deployment environment of your app will not be affected by that. So once I'm in the hub, I have a bunch of options right here. Let me zoom in and show you what they are. Now, you might have seen this hub for Windows Store applications, and you might have also used in the past as a developer the Performance Wizard. This is the older tool that we had, which has also a bunch of analyzers, but really these new analyzers right here, the CPU usage and the memory, are the ones that are finally both applicable to WPF developers or Win32 developers, but in our case, WPF is where we're going to spend our time. And they're available for you right here in the hub. If you have a Windows Store app, you have additional tools, but for our focus, let's take a look at first the CPU usage analyzer. So I'm going to click off CPU usage, and the way this tool works is that it selects a target in which it's going to capture information from and then generate some visualizations around CPU. And the way it knows the target is because I already have my solution open, and the solution has a start target, and that start target is the WPF application. You can change that up here, but in our case, there's really no reason to. It just needs an executable for WPF to be debugging. So I'm going to go ahead and click the start button. So I have my slider viewer WPF selected. I have my CPU usage selected. I cannot select more than one tool at a time. That feature exists for certain tools with store apps, but not for this, just making it very clear. And I'm going to go ahead and start it. It's going to ask me if it can run the collector, and my app will start. Let's give it a second to load the images. I did not build the most efficient app in the world. But now that the app is loaded, I'm going to go ahead and open up a couple of images. You know, all right, that's working fine. Oh, there's my cat. There's the channel 9, you know, folks, from I think TechEd. Yeah, there you go, TechEd 2014. So I've opened up a bunch of images, but now I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to open up, how about Xamarin's, to my friends at Xamarin, they were on right before. I'm going to hit the process button, and I'm going to wait. All right, that's done. And then I'm going to close this, and I'm going to do some more operations. There's me in Hawaii on vacation. I probably don't look very happy here, but trust me, I actually was very, very happy. So there you go. And finally, let's end with a sunset at the end here. And then let's close this application. Once I stop the application, or I could have clicked the stop button in the interface here in the top left, the collection will stop, and the collection will gather the data. Give it a few seconds. It's going to process the data, and then it's going to visualize the data. And now, this is where, once again, I'm going to say there's much better demos of and blogs and everything of CPU usage tool as a whole. But to spend a few seconds here, I want to give you a taste of what it can do for you to see if this is the right tool for you, and if you ever find a reason to use it, I'm sure you'll be fine. So how do we look at this visualization? First of all, there's a left to right visualization right here of CPU usage. It's a graph that shows you there was a little bit of bumpiness in the start, but 10 seconds in, you know, actually less than that, right? Let's say 5.6 seconds in, I think that's fair. 6 seconds in, the application stopped using the CPU for the most part, and it only had one real spike in the process. So you can zoom in and you can take a look. So you can say, I want to zoom in to a particular area. Oops. So there, I'm going to set the start at the end, and I can right-click and say zoom in. It's not working for me. That's fine. The illustration is good enough. So maybe it just needs a bigger time window or something. I'm sure the error is of the user, regardless. But basically, when you set these filter criteria, the bottom changes. So as I filter through the application, it changes what I see. So imagine you were running the app for 10 minutes, and you have a very, very, very long chart. And you're like, okay, I care about this moment, I care about that moment. You want to get in and take a look what was happening, what functions were running. Well, this is the information that's available to you at the bottom. This is the actual mapping of this segment in time back to some code, and then back to CPU usage and other kind of information here. So this is where you want to wind up, in the right space and time. And to do that, that selection is super useful. Like when it works for people in demos, that's really great. So here I'm going to say to myself, all right, so here it looks like some stuff was happening. I know my application well enough. There, Beth Massey is sending me a tweet. Thank you, Beth. That's really great. So in this case, the WPF app is popping up an image viewer. I mean, I can see that. I know my application, right? If you don't know this application, you could be looking at this and it's all kind of gibberish for you. But in this case, the pop-up image viewer is great, because now I know, all right, so these little spikes were just opening up and viewing an image over and over, and that's fine. It never really was a concern. But maybe I'm wondering, maybe I'm not sure what this big spike over here was. So I can select that and take a look at it, and I can say, this is interesting. It looks like it spent most of its time, if I kind of drill down, in pop-up image viewer process image button click. What is that? Well, you can right-click and go to the source code when the demo works. Well, even when the demo gods hate Dimitri, and that happens once in a while. It's still enough information, even if this feature didn't exist, which it was working a minute ago, to know that process image click is where I need to go. So if I was to open up process image click, in this case I would find a bunch of, in my case, actually very much junk code. So this tool helps you get right at the meat of things. It can show you your application spikes of CPU or no spikes of CPU over time. It lets you drill in a small space in time, and it also lets you drill down to the code that caused it to see kind of the stack that led to the operation that caused the CPU spike. It's a really cool tool, and that's the CPU usage. Now, we can't run CPU and memory at the same time, so I have to close all this stuff out here. And I'm going to go back to the Performance Hub. And in this case, I'm going to select the memory usage tool, and I'm going to hit start. All right, so there it goes. It's going to take a second again to start. And now we're going to look for a slightly different scenario. So in this case, I want to look at memory usage. Now you might ask me, wait a second, we just looked at the memory tool. What is this other memory tool? Why do we have two memory tools? Kind of a different purpose in life. The first tool that I showed you took a memory dump. It didn't interact directly with my application, right? So I could take memory dumps anywhere, even in production, and that's super useful. I mean, again, how many times does the app leave our desks, and then we find out that the problem really was just all in the production, depending on how the user used it, some environment thing. So it's really great to be able to get out to production and get that memory dumped down to your machine as a developer and diagnose it. This tool that I'm running right this second that's analyzing the application is actually analyzing the application as I use it in my development environment or as a tester. So it's actually going to let me collect data and take a look at it. So let's just run through some operations here. And the way that I've decided to simulate a memory leak in my application is quite simple. I'm going to hit the refresh button a couple of times. And if you're kind of paying attention here, I'll give you 5 points if you notice my scroll bar on the right. Something probably doesn't seem right to you. Why would refresh keep increasing the amount of images unless this was some data source? It's actually my file system. It's actually a static place in my file system. And if I scroll down as a tester, I can see the images are duplicating. So normally I would file a bug at this point. But let's say I'm not going to file a bug at this point. Let's say I'm just going to give you a chance as a developer to stop the application because you didn't notice, and now you want to take a look at what was happening. You could have actually looked behind. I should have showed that. We'll see if we can do that in a second. But you can see the visualization as it's being captured. You don't have to wait till the end. But you could take a look at it, of course, once things stop. So let's go ahead and take a look here. Demo gods hate me today. It's fine. We shall fight through. So, if worst comes to worst, we'll use screenshots. This is what happens when you install a lot of betas, folks. So, a lesson to be learned: don't install a lot of betas on your machine. I'm running the next update, kind of a preview release, and maybe that's screwing me up. That's okay. I'm going to try this one more time. I'm just going to rebuild the app. And we'll give up worst comes to worst, because once again, there really are some great demos of this. So I'm going to go hit Alt F2 again and try one more time. Start the app. All right, the app is loaded. I'm going to hit the refresh button like twice. Load a bunch of data that should never have loaded. Stop it. Oh. I'm sorry. This is the problem with being a demoer of many features over time. I actually forgot how to properly use this feature, but that's okay. We're about to correct that. So I forgot one of the most important, actually kind of coolest things about this tool. I shall gracefully recover. All right, so let's try this for a third time. Third time's the charm. I promise this is going to be awesome. I'm actually feeling hyped up. I'm feeling good that I figured out the problem. Once again, a second demo failed where I actually know what's wrong. That's amazing. That almost never happens. So here's the problem. This tool has a take snapshot button that I wasn't using. So I'm going to go ahead and hit take snapshot. And what it's going to do is actually take a snapshot of my application as it's running. It's going to tell me when it took it, and it's going to show me kind of a picture of sort of what the application looked like at the time. I'm then going to do some things in the application. I'm going to hit refresh. I'm going to hit refresh again. It's going to load a lot of images, right? Just like we saw before, the bug in the application. I'm going to take another snapshot. And now Dimitri is doing the proper demo. I think in my head I was still doing the other memory analyzer. So now that I've taken two of them, I actually want to show you another feature of this tool where if you want to force GC, force garbage collection, there's now a button to do so. This is very important because we all know as .NET developers that if you kind of build an application that's big enough, that's real enough, there's going to be times where the memory does go up. Certain collections do get filled up because they're not being disposed of, but they will. And you just got to give it time. You got to let the garbage collector do its thing. But when you're doing this kind of test, you might want to take that out of the equation. So they added an update 3 button. This is again one of those update 3 features. I'm going to hit force GC, wait a few seconds, take another snapshot just to make sure that forcing GC doesn't like resolve a problem. So now that I've taken 3 snapshots over time, now the demo will work properly. I'm going to give myself a pat on the back for this one. All right, so there we have it. Now we have an analysis view that we can actually go through. Thank you there for following me. So first of all, you have in the tool the first baseline, which is just the baseline, so there's no other information. And then we have what was happening to memory and the number of objects in memory after that. So the ability here is that you could see that at baseline I had 28,000 objects, I had a certain amount of memory, then the memory went up. This is where the arrows show you that went up, the objects went up. When I GC, they went down but by very, very little. So not a huge advantage there. I'm going to spare myself any more alerts. This should hopefully do it. All right. So now if I go in here and I click on this indicator, which shows that memory did go up, it's actually going to take me to another view. And in this view, it's going to show how my app memory has been increasing. And in here, I can actually see that my count from one of my list boxes went up quite a bit. I mean, there's also this event handler. I might want to investigate that at some point. But really, what I want to take a look at is this list box. That, to me, as a WPF developer, would have stood out immediately. Why is this list box going up in objects, right? And not only going up in objects, it's also going up in size. This tool lets me see that the size differential between the first and the second snapshot is growing. So I can see that things are going up and not in a good way. But now I need to know why. So what's happening in here? So if I click on to expand the list box, I can actually see that it has a bunch of instances that just should not be there. So this kind of information can very quickly lead you to say, oh, one of my list boxes, was just not working properly in the application. It was growing way too much, and you have the ability to see much more detail as you dive in. So it's a great tool. So think of these two tools are ways in your dev machine that you can investigate your application. So we have a question up from Max. This is a roadmap question. Unfortunately, I can't answer roadmap questions today. So as much as I'd like to give you something on any kind of roadmap, that's just not time and place for it. So I do apologize. But thank you so much for the question. All right, let's jump to the next demo. But again, if folks have questions, please keep them coming, and I will do my best to answer them. And if I can't, I'll be pretty upfront with you. All right, so we demoed the two tools. Let's go into our next slide here. So what did we see? A quick recap. We saw the XAML editor, the debugger. We saw a couple of analyzers and memory management, memory dump analysis tools. So if you think as a developer, you've gotten quite a bit over the last year of time. Your tooling is getting better, your profiling, your debugging. Those are the kind of places where as developers, I think we all really care. So hopefully you learned something new in this section of the presentation. All right, let's talk about the .NET framework. The .NET framework is what makes kind of WPF what it is, right? Without .NET, WPF would just be a UI framework. It wouldn't actually functionally do anything. So everything regards to everything from media to file access to the ability to talk to services, everything goes through the .NET framework. And the .NET framework has not been standing still. So think of this. .NET framework is actually now shipping through NuGet. I think this was said earlier today during speakers, but if you've never heard this before, we really do see NuGet as an official ship vehicle for the .NET framework. And in that official ship vehicle, I can give you just 3 great examples of libraries where HTTP client compression and immutable collections were all published as portable class libraries, which means in your WPF app, you can have a portable class library that could be used across many types of applications. You can use these capabilities inside of that library. You can encapsulate your logic, or you can make sure that you're sort of using just the same HTTP library in all your applications, even if portable class library isn't your thing. So .NET, as it continues to evolve, is continuing to give back those capabilities to WPF developers as well. So certainly it's related. You also have Entity Framework. This is a fundamental way that people in many companies, organizations, I certainly have done this in the past, that's how people do data access. So against SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, if you want to make it kind of a great experience, I mean, if you don't know what Entity Framework is, go check it out. It's awesome. It gives you, it's an object relational model which lets you get back to your data very easily from your .NET application. So as that has been evolving, version 6.1 is out right now, RTM. It supports WPF just as well. So as the .NET team evolves, they have not left WPF behind in any sense of the word. This has been going on since at least 2013, if not further back, and they keep making releases, and there's no release that doesn't support WPF in the context where that's applicable, right? You also have SIMD, which is something that a lot of people have wanted .NET to support. So SIMD, I forget the exact acronym, it's like single instruction, multi-something. But basically, it's a way that processors support parallelization of mathematical equations. That's the best understanding that I have. It's not something I've ever personally needed to use, but given how many people have asked for it in user voice, given how much buzz there was when we added this capability to the .NET framework, I think folks are very excited to see that in combination with some of our preview technologies, in the future there will be an RTM version of SIMD as part of the .NET framework. So ReaJIT combined with SIMD gives you this capability as a .NET developer and 100% applicable to WPF. That's where you can run this code, so doing mathematical or graphics, vector processing, all of that is getting easier getting faster for .NET developers and fully supporting WPF. We've also released a new version of Prism. Prism is a passion of mine, and no, not the government spying program, not that Prism. Prism was something that has been around for a very long time. It's a framework, it's an architecture, it's an approach to build other kinds of applications as well, but certainly WPF applications. So think of it as a toolkit for building an MVVM architected application. And Prism version 5 that supports WPF at .NET 4.5 just recently got released in April. So with this release, they've first of all started to make it componentized. Prism used to be this one big package you downloaded and had to add a bunch of references to your application. It used to be a little more cumbersome. Now it's a bunch of portable class libraries. It's all powered from NuGet, because once again, NuGet is an official ship vehicle for Visual Studio. And we address a bunch of high priority items on CodePlex that folks have requested. So that's one cool way. All right, so let's take a look at some of the demos here. I want to show you Prism v5 and show you the whole NuGet story as well. So as a WPF developer, if you want to take advantage, and here we can just use this really empty application. If you wanted to add any kind of NuGet packages to it, the way you would do that is you would go right-click on your WPF app, and you would say Manage NuGet Packages. And by saying Manage NuGet Packages, you're going to get a couple of options. The first one is you can look at the installed packages on your machine. You can look at updates to packages, but the one that's online is really what's most important. And if you've never used NuGet, and I'd be a little surprised if you haven't, but if you just like, what is this thing? Think of it as a way to get capabilities for your applications that other developers have packaged up into single kind of units, and they have a bunch of libraries, and NuGet lets you kind of take that set of libraries and just insert it into your application. And as the developer updates the packages and updates the framework, you get more and more capabilities that you can easily just get to your application. It's a really great way to get third-party libraries into your ecosystem. So what we have done is part of NuGet is we've added this Microsoft and .NET official feed, this online feed. So if you click on it, you're just going to get things that we've released. The great thing about it is that because NuGet is an open source ecosystem where anybody can publish packages, whether you're some other organization, some hobby developer, or Microsoft, it doesn't matter. It's an equal playing ground. With this right here, you get the ability to get to just the Microsoft official ones, and you can feel confidence that this is something Microsoft released. They're going to be created by Microsoft in the top right. And here we have things like Entity Framework available to us. With one click, we can get Entity Framework version 6.1.1 right into our application. And if they ship 6.2 later, you can use the Update tab over here on the left to find out that it's available and then install it into your application. So very, very powerful. Here, I've already have one checkbox because I've actually installed HTTP client NuGet library into my application. So again, this is the official feed. Please look at it. Please take a look into what capabilities it can bring to your application. All right, and next, let's see here, which one? Yes, Prism. So next I want to show you Prism. So Prism is actually quite easy to get started with. And let's talk about Prism for a few seconds. There's a whole, probably workshop we can do on Prism. There's quite a lot to talk about. I've certainly trained, development teams to use this technology, but let's talk about what it is. It's a way to modularize your app in an MVVM structure. It's going to make your app a lot more maintainable over the long run, because developers, if they know MVVM, and even better yet, if they know Prism, if they're switching between projects, between WPF projects and Windows Store and other projects that use Prism, that team is working on different kind of libraries. It's very easy for them to grab that application onto their machine, take a look at it, and kind of know how it's structured. The way that this sample application that team provides is structured, it gives you a great starting point for learning. So let me kind of zoom in to give you an idea. They provide what they call a stock trader reference application, and then more kind of smaller examples as well in their site. But I took the biggest one, right? This is like the everything. Has every capability of Prism in it. The good thing about Prism, you don't need to use all the capabilities, but this application does. And it lets you see how they've created a couple of modules here. I've accidentally collapse that. Let's expand it out. So they've created a bunch of modules that this kind of shell application uses to do different things. They also have dependencies. They have unit tests. Prism and MVVM lends very well to unit testing. So it's a great framework. It's available through NuGet. So if you, let's say, click on this reference application and click Manage NuGet Packages, and then you click on Installed, you're going to see that it's actually loaded up with different, not only enterprise library blocks, but also Prism packages. So Patterns and Practices is working on these blocks. They're continuing to release new versions. They have a roadmap. In this case, there is a roadmap up on their site. So take a look at Prism MVVM. If you're looking to structure your application in such a way that it's modular, it's open to testing, it's open to developers getting up to speed very fast, I think this is a great tool. Is Prism for everything? Is Prism the way you should build every single type of application? No, of course not. There's an overhead. You have to add a bunch of stuff to your application. It's going to give you capabilities. It's going to certainly make your application kind of generically more modular and testable and all that, but it's going to come at a development cost. So treat this as something part of your toolkit and use it when needed. And certainly I think it's something worth exploring as a developer. All right, let's take a look here. So in recap, what did we talk about? We took a look at Prism version 5. That's the newest version, so definitely take a look at that. It's a great MVVM library for your WPF application. We took a look at the official .NET NuGet feed, and I touched on Entity Framework and SIMD. There's just a lot out there. It'd be hard to cover everything, but in this case, I will open up one more web page to show you, which I think is going to be a great way to understand kind of what are all the different .NET libraries available for you. And again, there will be a blog post. There will be links, so don't worry about it. But there is a page up, and I'll open it up here, which the team is maintaining. And this page is all the NuGet packages. It describes the package. It describes the package capabilities. It's a big list of packages and capabilities that you can look through. So if you just are curious to explore what the .NET team has made available to different kind of developers, including WPF, this will be a great link. Again, there will be a blog post to it. And then Entity Framework, easy enough to find. Just search for Entity Framework on your favorite search engine. So those are great ways to get started there. Let's talk about Windows 8.1. And Windows 8.1 has a lot of topics that I could have covered. But I'll cover a few specific ones, which are kind of the newer things. Certainly, I do want to say that Windows 8.1 gives you the best touch experience at the operating system level. And there's a lot of third-party controls from our friends at Infragistics, Telerik, and other partners, DevExpress, et cetera, which create really great controls that you can take advantage of in your application. So if you're looking to create an application that looks beautiful and responds to touch and responds to gestures and has big touch areas, out of the box, the controls we provide are not going to get you there unless you do a lot of your own styling work to get you that capability. But if you use third-party ecosystem, that's a great way. I've demoed this before. I don't want to do it again. I certainly think if you want to see those kind of demos, take a look at something like my Tech Ed from 2013. I did those demos during that time. But there have been some new developments. So for Windows 8.1, they released an update at Build. At Build, Windows 8.1 Update 1 was released with two capabilities, which are not, I'm not going to call these out as, this is for WPF developers. No, this is not specifically for WPF developers, but it lends well to our ecosystem of the .NET framework. So think about it this way. If you have a lot of investment in .NET and you have full .NET framework components, and you want to take advantage of those components, you want to use some of those components in a Windows Store application. Windows Store has finally opened up the capability to get to locally hosted services and .NET components on a machine. The first one is the brokered Windows runtime components. They allow you to register a component globally on a machine, a .NET full .NET framework component. That component can then be used by any other application, WPF, ASP.NET, doesn't matter, but also Windows Store. So I think that's a very interesting combination. Just be aware it exists. There's a lot of documentation in the Windows Dev Center. They can show you how to do it. There's examples and templates. It's certainly for side-loaded applications only, so you couldn't publish like a consumer app and have it talk to a brokered component or network loop back to IIS or something local on the machine. But between these two capabilities, the brokered components and the ability for store apps to also talk to locally hosted services, I think it gets very interesting. We all have these things in our ecosystem, like we have .NET framework components, which are super important to our users. We have locally hosted services and locally hosted, SQL Server and all these things in a machine. And how do you build a awesome touch-first, experience as a store application that's running on one of these maybe Slate devices that's an x86? Now that's possible with these two capabilities. So definitely check those out. There's also another issue that's coming up more and more, and that's the issue of DPI. As monitors get better, as their resolutions get higher, we get to situations where there's sometimes even these strange combinations. Well, I wouldn't say strange, but just combinations where you have one monitor running at one DPI attached to a Windows 8 machine, another monitor running in another DPI. Windows is good enough to tell you, and WPF is good enough to know what DPI level your machine is at. But it's not out of the box good enough to know what each monitor is at. And sometimes in some high graphically important scenarios, you could see sort of an advantage to knowing the DPI level per monitor, because then you as a developer can do some XAML changes to make the UI better for your users. This could be very interesting, especially for dashboard WPF applications. I know there's a ton of them where they're running in like command centers, they're running in different operation centers, whether that's public safety or government, etc. And these applications might have one app that's running kind of maybe in a couple of monitors, but maybe it's projecting out to something else. There's different DPIs. How do you get that information? So there is now code that we've formally published. This is not just kind of throwaway code. I mean, it's documented through the Windows Dev Center. There are samples. The samples are, used at your own risk, but they work, and certainly worth exploring if you need this scenario. So I'll show you that sample real quick in a second here. All right, we've got a question here. So Pete, he's not looking for a roadmap, but he's just wondering if there's anything new planned for the WPF. Once again, this just isn't the session, unfortunately. I'd love to be able to say something, but that's just not something I can do. So when the roadmap or anything is ready to be talked about, there will be folks that will come out and talk about it. Maybe I'll be one of them. But certainly today is about a recap of what has happened in the past, up to now, how you as a WPF developer can take advantage of tooling and such. So definitely, thank you for your question, Pete. Sorry, I can't be more help. All right, so let's take a look at the sample. There is one challenge with the sample, and that is I need to have, to really show it, I need to have multiple monitors with different DPIs, which I don't have here. I'm displaying and to you folks out here. So let's take a look at what we can do, just to give you a sense of what the application is like. So I'm going to start the app just to show you what it does. And I'm actually going to zoom into one particular part of the screen. So when you run this app, it draws a bunch of shapes and buttons and such. This is the sample app that you'll see as one of my links in the blog post. And the window information is actually providing you the system DPI, the WPF render DPI, and the monitor DPI. It's giving you also physical pixels on the display. This is now available to you as a developer, along with, I think, some other information as well. So as a developer, you can make a choice that based on certain changes, because you know that a window got dragged from one screen to another screen, like this will detect it in real time as things are dragging. It's not just static where you have to run it once and then you have to keep reiterating. This is now making your window aware of DPI information. And I'll show you how that works in a second. And then once it's aware, you can make a decision. It's still not going to do anything automatically for you in that sense, but at least you as a developer can make that decision. The way it does it is a few things here in code. First of all, this sample is structured as follows. The sample has a WPF application. It just has one window, and it has a bunch of native helpers. The native helpers are basically there to guide you through the hard stuff. I mean, this is C++. And you have the source code to it. You can certainly go to town, do whatever changes you want. If you have C++ developers in your organization, I'm sure they'll know better than me sort of what this code does. But I can tell you what it sort of accomplishes functionally. And what it does accomplish functionally is give you a new window. So this sample right here is based on per monitor DPI window. So this is now, by implementing that library and that source code, you will now get this new window type that you can use in your application. By using this window type, it gets a bunch of properties. If you, actually, let's go down to source code here, code behind. So not only do you get a bunch of new events, like the DPI changed event right here, but you also get these properties. So you have the per monitor DPI helper, and you can get the system DPI, and then from the window you can get the WPF DPI, the current DPI, and you can figure out the physical pixels of the display. So this is a sample that just works out of the box, and again, really great if you're looking to take advantage of it. All right, so we just looked at a couple of things. Well, we looked at two and talked about two more. So first of all, again, update 1 to Windows 8.1 added a bunch of these developer capabilities, and I'm talking about the fact that store apps can now talk to the network, some kind of a local host, right? So IIS running locally on a machine for the network loopback adapter, and the ability to also to communicate with full .NET Framework components out there. So it can go to a .NET Framework component, and it can take that component and use it in the application, and that component can be reused by other applications, whether that's WPF, WinForm, ASP.NET, doesn't matter. It's all local on the machine, but it's only for side-loaded applications in both cases. So only side-loaded store applications would get that capability. We also took a look at the whole idea of scaling, because that's just so important in certain scenarios. So now we give you this logic and code right out of the box that you can play with. Gives you a great head start to do really kind of complex scaling, things with your application, basically. All right, let's take a look at integrating with services. This is something I've talked about before, but I think it's important and to reiterate that we see WPF as something that has to continue to always work with all these great new service capabilities that are appearing out there. Wherever the community is going, we want to follow. And certainly the community has spoken. RESTful services, all data endpoints, that's how a lot of folks like to build their service infrastructure. There's still a lot of WCF out there and other kind of services in the world, and certainly those are still supported. And certainly we still see all the services important for WPF application, especially with the reliance in most organizations on WCF quite a bit. But if you do have Web API or some other technology that's creating a RESTful web service or data endpoint being generated, WPF can certainly talk to those endpoints just fine. So there's no worry that you're going to create a new kind of endpoint that maybe works great with an iPhone, an Android, a Windows Phone, a Windows Store app. So all these modern applications that talk REST, and then you're going to have this WPF app that's going to need the same kind of data, and you'll be stuck. You're not going to be stuck. You're going to be able to talk to these RESTful services, and Web API is certainly a great way to make one of these services, and I'll show that in the demo. We also have SignalR in this list because SignalR is becoming quite an, I would say, over a good amount of time, that has become quite a popular way to build real-time communication. So there's other ways to accomplish this, certainly, but SignalR is something that you saw in like the Lego demo earlier, right? It's really easy to get up and running with it, and it supports all these mobile clients, and it supports WPF just as well. There's a sample right up on ASP.NET where SignalR lives. So that's a great thing. I'll show you both examples in a second here. But of course, we have Azure in the play as well. Azure has a couple of different things. First of all, it has mobile services. This is becoming a very popular way for developers to target mobile devices with a quick service they can stand up, that they can read and write data. It knows how to do authentication. It does a lot of these basic capabilities really great. And WPF does work well with it. I don't have a demo handy to show you, but WPF can certainly take advantage of a mobile service. Also, Azure Active Directory is another way to set up Active Directory. And you have libraries specifically built for WPF and examples up on their site that lets you do all of that. So those are two capabilities that you have in Azure, and many other things. So just don't assume you're blocked any of those. And now we're going to go ahead and show you a quick demo. So here I have, let's go back. So here I have a Web API example. I'm just going to close all these windows just to make it a little bit easier to consume. and show you. So first of all, I built a pretty standard looking, if you know MVC, web API. I have a controller that publishes some capabilities. I have some models. It creates a RESTful endpoint, end of story. Now in my WPF application, this is actually code that could have been written a little bit more elegantly, but it gets the job done. So here we have the ability for the client to talk to a web API. So it knows API/products. It's able to call out to the endpoint, and it's able to get the data back, and it's able to then copy those results into, serialize them, and then copy those products into my user interface. I'll kind of show you what that looks like. So here I have my WPF app, and it's going to go ahead and talk to this web API. Click Get Products. Things work well. It just returns the data, does the serialization. Everything works as expected. You have great debugging capabilities. So for example, if I was to do that one more time, you get all the things you would expect. You can see what the web API returned, how it was serialized to products. So it's the same kind of experience you might be used to with other kind of services in the past, like WCF. So it's a really rich experience, even from web API. There's some good samples out there. I'm not going to dwell too deep on this one. I will show you this demo. I like it. It's a cool demo. This is a Signal R demo. So if we go here and we start view in browser. So here I'm going to open up a web page that has a Signal R running on the server, and on the client we have this box that we can move around in HTML and CSS. Now the cool thing is, if I run the WPF app, it connects to the same service. It knows that there are two clients, and let me just kind of show this side by side. So here I am doing two-way real-time communication. The amount of code this took is amazingly small. So if I switch to the code and I go to, let's say, main window here, let's bump up the fonts a little bit. So the way that I was able to create it is I have a Signal R shape client. Let's go to the definition to that. So this client, let's do this again. This client is just a regular class that I've implemented that uses the hub and hub connection and iHub proxy, which is components that we provide for you as a .NET developer. And then we go ahead and we connect to a server and we start listening to its events. We start the server, we say, hey, server connect to this endpoint, this local host in this case, create the proxy, and I want you to monitor for the shape moved events, and the shape moved events get sent, and there's a way to stop it as well. And all the kind of standard .NET things work just fine here. So if I go back to main window, we can see that my main window is nothing that special. You just literally say that the shape, first you start the client, right? And then anytime shape is moved in the WPF client, it notifies the bridge to let them know that things have changed. And then if the shape moved in the server, it notifies the client as well. I mean, the amount of code here is like a few lines literally to make it all work. It really works great, and I certainly encourage you to check out Signal R if you're thinking about building real-time communication. There are certain other type of ways to do kind of two-way real-time communication that may be more robust for certain scenarios, but Signal R is a great way to do that as well. All right, so we took a look at how to easily integrate with services. We took a look at these two examples, Signal R and Web API, and we talked about mobile services and Azure Active Directory. There's a ton of other examples that works great with all data endpoints. I mean, anything you can think of nowadays, you can connect your WPF app. Your WPF apps are not living in isolation. They're able to talk to the world of services, so certainly investigate everything that's out there. And with that, we're done. And I just want to say one thing, which is thank you so much, not really for my session, I do appreciate it, but thank you so much for being here, hopefully for more than that, seeing all the great sessions we had at the .NET conference. And we hope to see you again tomorrow. We have a great lineup with ASP.NET coming up tomorrow. Thank you so much.